Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk Now Radio, listener supported radio where no topic is taboo. And we're brought to you by Revolution Radio Network, which is also listener supported radio where information never sleeps. I want to remind everybody if you want to call in and ask questions, the number is 347 688 2902. And don't forget, folks, that if we're going to stay on the air, stay censorship free, your donations do help keep everything that way, and it also helps us grow and expand more. So help us get the word out there and help us make the show what you want it to be. Now, joining me today is going to be Robbie Lunt, and he was on my show here a while back with David Roundtree, and we were discussing their book, Demon Street USA. However, today we're not here to sell a book or to, per se, discuss a book, although we may mention it here and there. We're here to discuss, the topic of basically where spirit meets matter, I guess you could call it. And before I call on the guest, let me pick up this caller and take that real quick before it disconnects. Caller, you're on the air.
I'm not calling you on the air. What I wanted to do is just find out if there's a direct phone application to listen into Mike Harris.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I'm trying to think.
I've got a number. I have a number 716-748-0112. Is that the one?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been here for a few months, but I never learned the number for the app.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to hang up. Okay. Bye.
Okay. Well, that was kind of unexpected, but it's nice to know he was listening, and I hope he gets his app up and running in time to listen to the rest of it. So, without any further ado, let's bring Robbie into this conversation, and he wants to start this off talking to me about breathing exercises that could help with my heart rate, which I was discussing in chat earlier. It so happens he was in the chat room reading it, and I didn't know it, so he thought he could bring that up, especially since breathing is also connected to spirit and quantum mechanics, so he thought it would fit. So, Robbie, how you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Royce, and Happy New Year.
You know what? New Year did pass not too long ago, didn't it?
Oh, actually, today is Chinese New Year.
Oh, okay, I got you. I wasn't aware of that.
It's the year of the sheep. Bah. So it should be a good one. Yeah, it's good to talk to you. I'm glad you're feeling better, but it's interesting. We were going to talk about arcanology, which is really looking at the hidden and the secret, that's the esoteric teachings from all around the world. And one of the things that we found in doing those type of studies is that breathing is so fundamental. Well, it's fundamental, but it's so fundamental to your health to breathe correctly. And most of the time, especially in the West, people do not breathe in a way that is most efficient. You and I were discussing it earlier. It's called diaphragm breathing or prenatal breathing. And as I said to you earlier, when you breathe in, when you look down, what's the first thing to expand? For most, especially if you have a military background, your chest fills up and all of that air is up there in the top of your chest. But singers and people that practice yoga and martial arts, when they take a deep breath, their lower body, their stomach area actually expands first. And then as they take in more and more of a breath, it slowly fills up to the top of their lungs. So in a way, the people that are doing that are getting, one, they're getting more oxygen into their system because they're filling their lungs better. And two, it's a relaxing kind of thing because, as you know, when you get up in your chest and you get standing at attention and you're filling your chest, it actually tends to tighten you up. It tends to make you a lot more tense. It's an interesting dynamic that your body does. The next time you feel, an anxiety attack or a bit of anger coming on and you're frustrated, if you just take the moment to realize how you're breathing, take your breath low, and you'll find that actually that anger and that negative energy dissipates a little bit. You might still be in the situation, but you're not quite as stressed out about it. It's an amazing thing. So have you tried this, Royce?
I have tried it a little bit. Kind of got off track and I forgot about it. I remember I told you earlier that I had read about it online. So
Mm-hmm.
when I read about it, I did try it for a day or two there. And then during the daily, life things, posting shows, hospital trips, and what have you, it just kind of got lost in the, fabric of time somewhere.
Well, I recently read a quote by the Dalai Lama, and he said, "You need to meditate at minimum, no matter what, 15 minutes a day. However, if you don't have time for 15 minutes a day, you need to make it 2 hours."
So if you already can't find time for the smaller, you need to force time for the larger somehow.
Exactly. And it's amazing how just even the breathing, especially if you find that your pulse is racing. And this is one that is, if you read about the breathing and about Qi, if you count your pulse and you start taking, as you breathe in, you make sure that you breathe in for 6 pounding of your heart. And then you hold it for the count of 3. Again, 3 pulses of your heart. And then you release that same breath in a count of 6. What'll end up happening? And then here's the trick, and this is actually the hard part, is when you fully empty your lungs on that 6th beat, you hold for another 3 counts. And what starts to happen is initially you'll get a little bit of a spike in your pulse rate, but then it'll slowly start to slow down. And your heart will slowly start to beat. It beats stronger, but it beats slower. And again, it really takes the anxiety away. The other thing about all of this really is also when you're concentrating on your breathing, the past disappears. You have nothing to worry about. The future isn't there, which is, again, something that people worry about. And you sit simply in the now. And by concentrating on your breathing, you're just concentrating on now, and all of the bull that drives us nuts in our daily life tends to slip away a little bit. And that's the true heart of meditation, is it's not about doing the chants or thinking the single thought. The heart and the goal of meditation is really to release the past, not worry about the damn future, and just sit now and enjoy what it is to be alive right at this moment.
Back to the breathing thing you were talking about, which we're still on it.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you a minute ago. I've had because you talked about anxiety, these episodes in the emergency room when my heart rate would spike up to say like 200, 217, that naturally I'd be in the middle of an anxiety attack, and they would have to either use the CPAP on me to open up the airway and get me to breathing right and calm down the heart rate, or they would have to, put me on a ventilator for a while. Now, do you suppose if I'd been familiar with this technique and my body had adapted to the technique and was used to doing it as a regular, that it might could have helped me avoid going through the CPAP and the ventilator by helping me control the heart before it got to that point?
Oh, I think so. And you also have it's the double thing. One, your heart's already starting to beat fast because you're in the hospital. And then you have the anxiety of being there, which it does nothing but compounds all of it, because again, then you have you have the worry about what's going on, the worry about the future, and you have all of the things that have happened in the past that start bombarding you. And so, yeah, it just creates that. If you can reach a point where you can relax and just be aware of now, then it can relieve a lot of that, especially the anxiety part. I mean, that's really what gets, because the anxiety dumps all the chemicals into your system, and everything compounds. So if there's something you can do before that to ease that, then the whole process is not so, it doesn't snowball quite as bad.
Now, does this also work with dealing with pain? Like, I don't know if you've ever had one or not, but when you're in ER for respiratory, they like to give you what they call a blood gas or a blood artery draw where they, instead of drawing from a vein, they draw the blood directly from an artery. And, oh, that's one of the most painful things you'll ever want to feel. Could some kind of breathing technique help put you in a kind of like a mental place where it could help you deal with this kind of pain?
Oh, absolutely. Because again, you're able to isolate to just concentrating on your breathing. I have never had that, but I have had the wondrous adventure of passing many kidney stones. And it's definitely, the breathing helps tremendously. Well, the other thing too is, again, as things contract, you can't get the energy that you need to get there. The body can't get the chemicals that it needs to get to those areas because they're contracted and tight. And the breathing allows you to relax. In something like that, being able to breathe, to do the breathing, and then to you work from the breathing. The breathing is really the 0 point. And then you can work using that to relax your whole body. And as you're breathing, as you breathe in, you can feel the energy coming in. And as you breathe out, you can feel the contractions leaving. And in doing that, places like where they're taking the blood and that kind of thing, you can relax the tenseness around that. And that definitely has the ability to ease the pain.
So some of the pain you're experiencing is your own tensing.
Oh, absolutely. It's your own just getting tight around the things that are happening. Absolutely.
You know, I can see how that could work from my own personal past experience, even though I haven't been up on this breathing thing. I used to have this thing going on where if I had broken a bone or sprained a muscle or, what have you, or was having a really bad toothache, that I could sit there and just relax. And the more I relaxed and just didn't worry about the pain, just let it run its course, it would get through me and ease up a lot quicker than if I was all upset and anxious and tight, in other words. And that's without the breathing.
Absolutely. And the breathing enhances the whole effect. I mean, especially for things like broken bones. I mean, what's one of the wonderful things they do for you now? They put you in that incredibly oxygen-rich atmosphere, and that's supposed to accelerate all of your healing processes. So in a way, by doing the deep breathing, you're doing the same thing, just without the medical expense.
Well, I was not aware that they were using oxygen as part of the treatment for bone healing nowadays.
Mm-hmm. It's just having an oxygen-rich environment does wonders for your system. Well, I look at the body. Quite frankly, I call it a meat suit, and the body is what holds the essence of what makes us all spiritual. But this meat suit that we use, it has certain things that it has to have to run at its most efficient, and one of those is oxygen. And the more oxygen it has, the more efficient everything fires, the more efficiently your cells rebuild. It's, just don't get into something that's too rich because, oxygen is one of those wonderful things. It can kill you, too.
Yeah, I've heard tell that if you get too much of it. That kind of does remind me, though, that as interesting as all this is about the body needing oxygen, part of what heals people I've read that are sick or like they have bacteria, for example, is antioxidants.
Right.
So if your body needs oxygen, how does antioxygen, you see what I'm saying, where I'm coming from?
Well, that's when you're starting to get into the medical terms that I have to look up. But and the antioxidant is more. It actually inhibits oxidation, which is a process, not necessarily the element. Does that make sense?
Maybe.
Yeah, it's funny because part of the thing that we feel, especially one of the reasons why we really want to push the arcanology, is a lot of the things that happens, especially in the paranormal and the metaphysical world, is so many terms that are close to each other yet mean exactly the opposite, yet then there's so many terms that are the exact same thing that nobody, it's like, well, no, I say it means this, so this is all it can mean. And I think that happens a lot of times, especially in medical terms. You have terms that are so alike, yet they mean something that is so intrinsically different that us poor laymen really can't keep it straight sometimes.
Like bronchitis and bronchiectasis.
Exactly. Or, my favorite is it's just chi. Chi is a wonderful term. Are you familiar with the term? I'm sure you are.
It's the Chinese or the Asian term for spirit.
Well, it's not so much spirit as it is the electrical energy that's in your body.
Oh, I always heard them say it was their spirit. Well, your spirit is an electrical energy too, though.
Exactly. And see, there is exactly that. We're talking about the same thing, yet just getting around the cultural terminologies make it such a game and such a dance. When chi is a wonderful word. There's the other words for that are prana, which is the Sanskrit word. And then you have the scientific words. I believe that Dr. Wilhelm Reich called it orgone.
He was one that was selling something about orgone on the internet for a while, wasn't he?
Oh no, unfortunately, his research got him in trouble, and that's again where we start getting into the overlay of the quantum mechanics and the metaphysical. I think Dr. Reich had a lot of the same problem that Tesla did, in that their technologies have wonderful, wonderful, just expansive and, just properties. The things that Tesla wanted to do with giving the world free energy, and the things that Reich was coming up with to, the healing modalities that were there. Unfortunately, the flip side of their technologies is that they're very adaptable to the military. And for most technologies, if the military can use it, they tend to take it, make it hidden, and then we don't get to hear about it for quite a long time. So it's, that's the downside of all the metaphysical. Dr. Reich has some wonderful, wonderful concepts and ideas, just as, so much that we do involves Nikola Tesla, and yet so few people, well, it's changing now, but for many, many years, nobody had even heard of him.
I know, I didn't hear about him until I got on the internet. Seriously. No.
And the fact that we have AC power is all Nikola Tesla. The fact that you and I are talking on this telephone and that it can be broadcast out without any wires is all Nikola Tesla. And the fact that we are not told about it, because the flip side of that is some of these technologies can be used for military applications. And that's truly a shame, but it is the world we live in right now.
I was just remembering back in grade school, or kindergarten, first grade, second grade, somewhere in there, they didn't teach about Nikola Tesla, but they did teach about Benjamin Franklin flying his kite with a key and discovering electricity, and about Thomas Edison creating a light bulb. And I guess me, like many others, probably just assumed that was the end of the story. In other words, no more to add.
Well, there's a famous Supreme Court case, and I believe it is Tesla versus Marconi, and it was in 1942. And where Tesla got tired, they kept saying, "Well, what do you think of this Marconi guy?" He said, "Well, yeah, he's got the radio, but he's using 14 of my patents." And so they took it to court, and Tesla won, and the Supreme Court said, well, yeah, Tesla is the one who is responsible for the wireless transmission of electromagnetic energy. And a Supreme Court, and yet you and I both were raised that Marconi was the one who developed the radio.
That is true, and also that he was responsible for direct current.
Uh-huh. Well, the whole thing, I believe it was I forget which World's Fair it was, but it was the last one of the 1800s. Westinghouse won the bid over Edison, and Edison got really mad and refused to give Westinghouse any light bulbs for the whole World's Fair. So that's when Tesla came up with the fluorescent light, which is another thing that, and it's this interesting thing, and that's why there is something like arcanology, because people need to study and need to get to the roots of these things that are hidden by culture, by science, by commerce, that aren't let out, that perhaps people should know.
So in one sense, we're not really that different from our, I guess you could call them Egyptian forefathers and Sumerian forefathers who were using the, say, spiritual realm or, say, properties there of it for some of their inventions of the day. We're kind of doing similar with lights.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the new one I just had done that I'm still trying to wrap my head around is I had a cold laser treatment. I'm a technician. I'm a lighting guy. I work on stages. I'm very familiar with lasers. And this whole concept of this whole cold laser, to where the photons from the laser go through the soft tissue and only impact the hard growth, it's mind-blowing. And, that's the thing is...
So they could disintegrate a kidney stone and never leave a scratch.
Oh, exactly. Well, this one was specifically for a bone spur, and it figures out basically the impedance of your skin, and then it figures out the impedance of your bone, and where it sees the differential where it shouldn't be, that's where it sends its photon energy. I mean, 100 years ago, if you pulled this machine out, you'd be run out of town on a rail, if not burned at the stake. It's magic.
Yeah, really.
Yet to us now, it's, wow, that's cool science. So, you're right. Some of the things that have been lost over the millennia, that at that point in time probably were considered magic, were, everything is related, and when you really get down to it, it's science and magic and spirituality, really, they're all interconnected. There's no way to get away from it, but people do. I mean, that's one of the neat things about now remember, Royce, you asked to go down this rabbit hole.
Okay. You're about to trap me.
Are you familiar with psychotronic weapons?
Not greatly, but I have heard tell of them. I think this is some kind of like they have the ability to use devices, say like HARP, to control your emotions and things of that nature.
Well, HARP is part of that Tesla technology, but these were weapons that during the Cold War, both the Soviets and the U.S. tried to develop weapons that were driven by your mind. And one of the things that they found is that if there's a skeptic in the room, the amount of offsetting energy that's put off by that skeptic's mindset is enough to cancel the experiment. So that the weapons were very flaky. It wasn't something that happened all the time, and that's one of the problems we have in doing the paranormal investigation of psychic phenomena, is it's not always dead on, and a lot of times it's based on your personal interpretation of what's happening. So, that's everything, and that's what they found now with quantum. That was one of the amazing things they found with the experiments in quantum science, is that almost inevitably at that level, the experiment would come out in the way that the people that were doing the experiment envisioned it, because there is a level where the energies interact, and our minds believe. It's funny. I was at a banquet last year, and I had somebody tell me that science has discovered absolutely everything they can about the human body. There is nothing,
or at least
that
they
can be
believe they have.
exactly. And Royce, it seemed to me that this was a very depressing point of view.
Well,
I
yeah, it
like the
is,
world.
because once they think they got it, why look?
Exactly, and I see the world as a much more exciting place. I mean, the life is far more interesting than we could ever imagine. It's way beyond, I think, our abilities as humans to even totally grasp the enormity of the what we're in, of this wonderful spiritual machine that we're delving in right now.
Well, yeah, and you know for a fact the scientist that wrote that, he has to, by default, has no choice but to be wrong in that statement, simply because they have not done any experiments in the spiritual or paranormal realm that they keep rejecting. And if you've left out half the ingredients, then how can you know what all's there?
I,
I think it's a valid point.
oh, absolutely. It's just it's so much, and I heard that, and I owe that person actually a debt of gratitude, because while we got into a heated discussion, I have this wonderful habit, Royce. If you and I disagree on something, and I know I'm 1,000% right, when we walk away, I will always go and do my research, even if I know I'm right beyond the shadow of a doubt. I will still go and read, because somewhere you've picked up on something that I don't understand, and I really want to know where you're coming from. And I think that's missing a lot in science.
Yeah, that, and I think it also helped to look into the person you're having the debate with, his research, and try to get a better standing of it, because it's easier to find out what you might be missing if you understand what he's seen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, that's what the arcanology is about. It's about looking at those things. What drives each and one of these things. It's funny, when we've been talking about Tesla, and science has always seemed to have this thing where some genius will show up, and he will come up with the most outrageous idea you could ever. Oh, this cannot be. The world is round. How dare you? And that person in their lifetime will not be given their due yet. 100 years from that point, all of a sudden, some research student will find this and go, wow, look at this. There might be something to it. And then all of a sudden, it becomes the new law of science. So that's the other thing that we always have to keep in mind.
Well, I got to ask you this, now that you mentioned the Earth being round. Just out of curiosity, I don't know. It's really kind of silly. It just popped into my mind. But what would you say if an astronaut came back from the moon and said, I saw the Earth from space, and it is definitely flat, and everybody else has lied?
It's interesting, Royce. We have this, my dear friend, Sifu Bill Smith from the Denver area. He coined this term called subjective grooviness. And it's how we actually describe reality. And, I'd have to talk to the guy, because if his belief system is so locked into place and he has total faith in what he's saying, who am I to doubt what he sees without actually going there myself?
Which, of course, would be a trick for you to get into space without doing out-of-body projection.
There is that. And this is here. I need to read you this, because this is just so beautiful.
Okay.
And it's subjective grooviness. The term subjective grooviness arose out of the need for a term in relation to the thoughts and views generated by the modern New Age spiritual movement, as well as discoveries and claims held by religious sects, cults, and the scientific community. It now encompasses everything and can also be used as a replacement of the term samsara as used by the Buddhist community. And basically the idea is that even the most objective experience can and will be stacked with greater and greater amounts of subjective interpretation. Here's an example. The sun is shining on a clear, cloudless day. Two people standing next to one another are having the same objective experience. The sun is shining on them, but each of them has their own subjective, groovy interpretation. One guy says, "Oh my God, the sun is so hot it's burning my skin. I hope I don't get skin cancer." The guy standing right next to him spouts off with "Oh, the sun, giver of life, I receive your healing rays through all the pores of my body." Now, each is now several layers removed from simply being with the sun shining, and each person's subjective grooviness is now coloring all of their experiences and any outcomes. That's why 10 people can watch a car wreck. They can stand on a corner. They can see a car wreck. Each of them will give you their perfect eyewitness account of what just happened in front of them. Yet when you lay those eyewitness accounts in front of each other or next to each other, you find that there might be some similarities, but man, this woman over here, she saw something that this guy would, wow, they weren't standing on the same corner. Yet their realities are, in fact, valid. And what they saw, influenced by their perceptions, is also valid. So, it gets kind of hard. Somebody goes up, they stand on the moon, they look at the earth, and to them it's flat. Reality is malleable. It changes as much as
it could be reality is different in some ways from one individual to the next.
It absolutely is. There's no doubt. Now, we all have the consensus reality. I look out a window and I see a tree. You look out a window, you see a tree. But how we interpret that, I live in a place that I go north by northwest about 2 hours, and a lot of people see it as the absolute desolation, as nothingness, as just this horrible, horrible, merciless landscape that will just eat you up and spit you out in a moment's notice. And it's just so ugly. My wife and I go to this same area, and we are overwhelmed by the beauty, by just the landscape, by just the high desert and what it has to offer and the life it has to offer. So there you go, right there. There's two perfect examples of somebody looking at the same thing and seeing a completely different object.
Got another example. Colorblind people. Some people might see black and you might see orange.
Uh-huh.
That's what color blindness is all about. And you both see exactly what you say you're seeing. But your eyes are designed to see it differently for some odd reason. You can't explain it. Other than saying colorblind, in other words. There was a case one time when I was at home watching an air show, and a friend of mine, Larry Bowman, was at home watching it at the same time, and we were on the phone talking about it. And all of a sudden, there was a big explosion when two airplanes collided. And I was watching it, and I saw one of them, the airplane that caused the crash, trying to pierce the arrow of the heart that all the other airplanes was forming, in other words, and he missed. And I swear to God, Larry did not see it at all, swore I was seeing things. But then he went back, because he had it on VCR, and he watched it in slow motion. He come back to the phone and says, "Oh, that plane was there." But that's, again, another example of where I saw something that Larry did not see, in other words. Both watching the same show at the same speed, but yet I saw it and he didn't. So, there's, probably countless cases of what you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's interesting because there's actually a mechanical aspect of it. When we're born, we have this wonderful, wonderful brain inside our heads that is taking in everything. It takes in all the information that's coming at us. And it's a sponge. It's a huge psychic sponge. But as we get older, the information starts to become a little overwhelming. And as a natural defense mechanism, the brain is able to go, well, you know what? This is a constant ringing that's over here. I really don't need to be aware of that. And that little filter switch turns on. Now, as we grow older, more filters are turned on. In fact, what ends up happening is culture turns a lot of switches, and then your environment, how you're brought up, that clicks a whole bunch more, so that you are able to deal with the information around you, and your mind is able to deal with the information that's incoming all the time. Now, for some people, certain switches are, it's like if you play ball, you play baseball. You know, some guys are awesome pitchers. Some guys are awesome hitters. You got great outfielders. You know, you got the great shortstop. They're all incredible athletes, but it's all manifest in a different way. I think you get a lot of that with mental abilities. You know, you can have 10 geniuses sitting in a room, and each of them will have their own area of expertise. And I think that's what happens through life. As you hit these switches, some of them are a little shaky, and that's what, for me personally, you know, some things that have happened where you have that epiphany, that moment where all of a sudden the switches turn off and you can pick things up. The book, which, you know, that Dave and I put out, one of the things that happened through the experience in that is my switches for knowing that there is a ghost in a building, those switches got turned off. And I can't walk into a building that's haunted and not immediately know it. And that happens for everyone. And I think it happens with all of these different, you know, all your different abilities. Some people are more able to see the future, or to hear things that aren't really there, or see things. That's what you're predisposed to. And if those switches aren't turned on in your subjective grooviness, in your mind, then that's what you experience. And if you're experiencing that, to you, it's absolutely real. I mean, there's a lot of things now that in the past, quite frankly, let's face it, a lot of those people that are on TV right now as psychics and paranormal investigators would have been locked up even, 30 years ago. But because we're more aware and because people are more accepting, we're allowed to now show that. And I'm hoping what's happening in all of this is that people's realities, a lot of the hardness, a lot of the hardcore boundaries are starting to break down. But in that, you also see those people that are so locked into their subjective grooviness that they're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that it manifests. And one of the ways we see that is and I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's in any fundamentalism whatsoever. I don't care if they're Christian. I don't care if they're Islamic. I don't care really if they're Buddhist. Those people that get so locked in the fundamentalism, in the this is how reality must be, those are the ones that are having troubles right now because a lot of our boundaries are starting to collapse.
They've created a reality that's not subject to change. And, of course, change is the only constant in the universe, so they're trapped.
Absolutely. And that's where we have a lot of problems. That's where I think now especially you're seeing a lot of these things where, well, I don't know, he was the nice guy next door, and then all of a sudden he went down the street and took out the whole restaurant. We just don't understand. And I think you're seeing a lot of that because they've done the studies. And the way that technology works, I mean, our grandchildren are going to be probably a little bit cyborg because the technology it expands exponentially. It's just not 1 + 1. It becomes 1 + 2 + 4 + 16. And it's amazing what it does. And I think in a lot of instances, we haven't been brought up to allow that much change.
Well, they've been for years and actually centuries, or not centuries, but decades now, made the start for cyborgs. I think the start of it was in prosthetics because it probably starts out as something good and beneficial, in other words, and primitive, and then as time goes on, it gets less primitive and more technologically designed, and then the next thing you know, it becomes something the military ends up using.
Uh-huh. And then when the military is done with it, they give it to the entertainment business. It's amazing. Well, the latest one on that is the holograms that are starting to happen. At Coachella 3 years ago, in the middle of one of the rap sets, Tupac Shakur came out on stage and started singing. And the crowd noise was incredible when you watch it. The crowd is cheering, they're cheering, and all of a sudden he walks out on stage, and there's not a sound. It's like the whole crowd goes, because here's the dead guy out on stage in 3D singing, saying, "Hey, Coachella, what's up?" And, so you got to wonder where the government has that technology.
I was not aware of that show, to be honest with you. So you're telling me that holographic 3D technology is actually in use right now?
Oh, absolutely. I had a buddy of mine tell me about the show he had done with Brad. Well, he was working at a fair, and they had Carrie Underwood the night before, and followed by Brad Paisley. Now, they've just done a song together. So the next night, while he's doing the song, she came out on stage and sang with him. However, she was at her next gig doing her show.
Wow. That's some pretty handy stuff there.
There's rumor in the business that they are talking about either a Michael Jackson show or an Elvis show in Vegas.
And then all these people swearing Elvis never died are going to say, "See, the king has come back."
Well, the other thing, when you turn it to the whole, if you want to go down, again, the conspiracy vein, so what you need to be careful of, Royce, is when Jesus appears in front of the world and starts talking to us.
It's not a hologram.
Well, have your laser pointer ready and point your laser pointer at him. And if it goes through him, it's a hologram. Now, if it hits him, you better hope he's got a sense of humor.
Or a sense of understanding, one of the two.
But this is all, and I think a lot of it is technology is reaching a point where it's starting to cross some of these boundaries. It's starting to cross some of the spiritual boundaries. It's starting to cross some of the, a lot of things that have been separate before are going to start being manifest. I think that David is on wonderful track to use technology to prove the existence of the paranormal. And that's one of the problems that the paranormal and science and I think the psychic community have, is because the paranormal, a lot of paranormal groups are always out to debunk. That's their first goal, is to prove that it doesn't exist. And it gets tough for the people that have abilities, psychic abilities, and are sensitive, to be told by scientists, well, I have nothing of record on this, so it doesn't exist. Well, that's the bounds that we need to start breaking down, and I think that David is doing an awesome job of that.
Well, it seems to me that somebody in academia must be working toward the same goal themselves in order for some of the technology you're talking about, like holographic 3D technology, to be coming about. Not everybody in academia can be disbelievers and debunkers. There has to be somebody that's got the foresight and the vision to work with it, or they wouldn't have even attempted it.
Oh, there definitely are. And the thing, though, that happens with them, since they become considered fringe science.
Pseudo?
Well, no, see, that's the thing, is that shouldn't be the word that's used. Because it's not pseudoscience, it's fringe science. It's science that's not accepted by the mainstream. And perhaps at some point in time it could be considered a pseudoscience, but, until you get it all together, can you really? Again, the chi is the wonderful thing, because one of the things that was brought to my attention is Well, then where's your paper? Where's your background? And I did this research, and even the National Institute of Health on their website, there's a study from a Japanese group where they were measuring the output of a Reiki healer. They were actually getting an output, and that's where that's where the fringe science starts coming in. There's a wonderful man. His name is Dr. Philip Callahan, and he really works a lot with vibrational energies, with actually the true waveform of the energy. And some of the things he's come up with, some of his theories and ideas are mind-blowing, like the reasons why certain folk remedies work. It's not necessarily that it's these things that you're putting together. It's one of the ones, what was he talking about? I believe in somewhere, it must be in Europe. There's an old folk remedy for when you have mumps. And you take a burlap bag and you soak it in seawater. And then you tie it around a burrow. And then you have the person with mumps crawl underneath the burrow's belly 3 or 4 times. Okay, now, yeah, that sounds like pseudoscience to me. I'm sure it does to you too. When you take and you start actually looking at the waveform, the actual energetic waveform that is put off by the combination of the living being with the wrapped in this salt water, and you take the waveform of the person who's suffering from the mumps, you actually find that the mumps virus and this waveform are 180 degrees out of phase. Now, when you have electricity or sound that's 180 degrees out of phase, they cancel. So, in essence, what some of these folk remedies have done is they set up an energetic field that's 180 degrees out of phase with whatever virus or bacteria or whatever is giving you that problem. And so it actually basically it doesn't drain the energy, it negates the energy of those things and eases your illness.
You would think they'd be able to do this here with AIDS and cancer as well.
Royce, it's funny you should say that because Dr. Callahan showed us exactly how it can be done. But there is no money in curing these diseases. There is only money in curing the symptoms. And that's where a lot of things that are happening in the world today are coming to a big, it's a huge pimple that's getting ready to pop. And that's one of the reasons, is because there are things out there. There are ways to help negate the cancers. There's things that people have gone and they've shown. But it's not, it affects the bottom line.
Same reason they got all these free energy devices on the market, or not on the market, but patented. But yet you don't see them on the market because it had put nuclear fusion out of business.
Absolutely. And that's, and that's why maybe it's a good thing that we are starting to kick down the walls between spirituality and science, because we need to know how much of it's connected. Every morning I watch the news, and it's a website. It's called Suspicious Observers, and it's a site that correlates the weather on Earth with what's happening on the sun and the rest of the solar system. And the gentleman that runs it, Ben Davidson, oh man, he is spot on. He is accurate, and it is very mind blowing. And one of the things that we're seeing, I don't know, I don't mean to do this. Oh, well, of course I do. I'll rub it in, Royce, because it's going to be fun. It's going to be 70 degrees here today. I sit at 5,000 feet in the middle of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and we have no snow. Yet the rest of the country is just being blasted. And this site is showing the correlation between what's happening in the solar weather and what's happening. There's a gentleman out of Thailand now, Dr. Yu Yin, I believe he's out of Thailand. He's out of the Far East, and he has a theory about sunspots and the relationship to megastorms and earthquakes on the planet, on our planet. And it's amazing, that correlation. But again, you don't, when you look at that, you don't see it. That's considered fringe science because it doesn't follow the traditional bounds that we're now locked in. So, yeah, a lot of this is all going away, Royce. It's amazing. There's an ancient Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. And I think that we've got it because life is changing, and it's just an amazing thing.
Just to let you know, break time music should be interrupting us any second now.
Okie dokie.
Now, do you have your own website real quick? Like, see if we can slide that in before it sounds off.
Oh, yes, it's arcanology.wordpress.com.
Okay, could you put that in the chat room during break, and I'll try to click on it and put it in my favorites?
I certainly will.
Okie doke. We'll be back after break, folks. Welcome back, everybody. Going to continue our conversation with Robbie Lunt. But I threw a link in the chat room during break to www.beforeus.com. You might want to check it out. It was the website's owned by Jonathan Gray, a man who I interviewed. Well, he's an archaeologist. I interviewed him some 2 or 3 years back. Very interesting man. He's got some interesting facts on the website. He deals with archaeological finds that, they perform more modern tasks than they did what you would expect from ancient tasks, I guess you might say. And there's some surprising stuff there you might want to check out. So, Robbie, are you back with us?
Oh, absolutely, Royce. Good to be here.
Good to be here, too. At least for me. If I'm here, I'm not in the bedroom arguing with my wife. But, you're not by any chance familiar with Jonathan Gray, are you?
The name rings a bell.
Ah. Well, he's found out a lot of interesting facts that he's got posted to his website. Like Egyptians back in 2000 BC had
Absolutely.
coin slot machines, steam engines, speedometers, machine-cut optical lenses, pardon me, and screen projectors. The list goes on and on. It covers China, America, different various places, the Mediterranean, the kind of stuff that you would expect in modern times, but you would have never expected it back then.
Well, there's I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, but there's a book called Power Plants of Giza that is just fascinating. And the gentleman that wrote it is a civil engineer, and he pretty much said that, there is no way that we could build these pyramids. We can't do it with our modern techniques. So how the heck did these people build it? So it's I think that there is an explanation for it, and it's how we can tie together the spirituality and the physics.
They had to have a spiritual connection somewhere. I don't see how they could have gotten out of it. Their astronomy knowledge is way too far not to.
Oh, absolutely. And they had a better knowledge of frequencies and vibrations than we do. We've lost that somehow through the centuries. We've lost what that is. And what's interesting is right now, the quantum mechanics is talking about the whole string theory. And string theory is just when you get to the source of energy in the universe, whatever that source is, whatever you want to call it. But that source energy, the physicists are saying, well, it's a bunch of strings, and how they vibrate together create what we call reality, which of course means the hippies were right.
The hippies, did they say that?
They said everything's vibration, man. And they were absolutely correct. Everything is vibration, and that's why a lot of the things that happens on the spiritual realm can interact with the scientific realm. And if everything that we know and consider is on the electromagnetic spectrum, then you can take all of these phenomenon, all of this paranormal, and create a normal out of it, because it's not unknown. It's just not known. It's just not known how to register it scientifically, and it's really everything has its own vibrational patterns. And it's in those vibrational patterns that reality is formed and how things react with each other. So it's it's all coming. It's nice how it's all coming together now in our lifetimes. We're able to see this.
Kind of like different speeds and different vibrations of different densities of the different vibrations, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Maybe intensity and what have you.
And that's where you get, what is it that makes somebody psychic? It's the fact that in their minds, because we all take this information in, our minds take all of the information that's given to us, and then we discern what's important to us. And for people that are psychic, all of us have that information coming to us, and it's just you recognize the pattern flows. You recognize that this certain vibration that you can pick up in your instrumentation, in your meat suit here, it means X. And that's where all the vibrations are. And it's people have lost that, and I think they really had it in the past. It's interesting. We have a friend that she wanted my wife to build her a few ancient Egyptian ceremonial devices out of clay. And we had several psychic friends who basically told my wife, it's like, those are really interesting, but whatever you do, don't have them all in the same room at the same time. And I think it's a dual thing. I think that the ancients had a better understanding of vibration, and they knew how to manipulate it. And so what a lot of times is seen as magic is nothing more than just the science explained. It's funny. I'm an electrician. I deal with electricity, and it's magic. It's flat out. I can tell you what happens when you use it, but what it is and how it really comes to be that one's out there. That's one that, science uses it all the time, yet they truly can't completely explain it. The same with light. So, please.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you was fixing to end a sentence there. But I was going to say, it seems to me that it's kind of hard for science to say energy can be neither created nor destroyed when if you take an alternator and it spins fast enough for a generator, it in fact creates energy, doesn't it?
See, that's where it starts to get interesting. Yeah, it and that's why science has trouble, because again, you're talking about, you've just added the second into science, and that's what is magnetism. You see it's like a disease, you see all the symptoms, but you don't know the cause. And I think that the magnetism is that. Gravity seems to be that too, because part of gravity seems to be, part of what causes gravity is the magnetism, yet it's the rotation sometimes, or it's mass. So it's, again, science is all based on theories, which means that it's malleable. We can change it as we need to, or discover it.
You mean if we believe in it?
Exactly.
See, this is something that a lot of people don't get, if you ask me, is in order for something to be real for you, you have to believe that it's real, especially things that have not been invented yet. And this is something inventors get. Look at all the people that did not believe there could ever be any such thing as an airplane, but the Wright brothers believed, and for them, they made it a reality.
Very true. Now, I think there's a caveat to that, though. And I've heard it in dealing, with things like curses, or things like dealing with evil entities. There's a belief that if you don't believe in them, they have no impact on you whatsoever. Yet there is a certain reality, and in that reality, they have an energy pattern. And just because you mentally don't believe in them doesn't mean that their energy pattern cannot not only interact with yours, but affect your flow of energy.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I said real to them or real to you. Because people like this, what they do in situations like that is they lay it off on something else. It may be that exact energy you're talking about, but rather than recognize that energy, they'd rather call it an illness or a parasite or a bacteria or, whatever they can come up with, in other words. So in their reality, what you're talking about never existed. This is what did it. You see what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And, well, I feel that way about, bless his heart, the amazing Randy.
I was thinking about him earlier when you were talking about people proving their paranormal abilities.
In Randy's subjective grooviness, paranormal does not, cannot, will not exist, period. Now, and what he has going for him is that he's a good magician. He's a good illusionist, which means that no matter what you do, no matter what you can make manifest, he can recreate it. Now, the psychics are doing it without having a bunch of gear and techs and stuff, and Randy needs some gear and things, but he can recreate it so that without some kind of, a near-death experience that really shakes his true foundation, he'll never give his $1 million away.
Well, I think he also makes sure he stacks the deck where they're not going to do it to begin with.
Well, exactly. It's and because that's his subjective grooviness. That's how reality has to be for him, and I can understand that. It like
kind of makes you wonder, why is it so important to him that something not be real?
It has to do with nature and nurture, and the funny thing is I've read that in a lot of. You look at what some of the mentalists do. Like Darren Brown and the amazing Kreskin, and they will deny any kind of paranormal ability at all. They will tell you this is how, this is scientifically, this is how we do it, and we don't believe in any psychics or mediums, and that's all, a crock, and we'll prove them all wrong too. But I watch these guys work, and I've been lucky enough to work with Mr. Kreskin before, and the amazing is absolutely true. And while they say, "Oh no, I'm using the NPL, the looking at people's faces," and that tells, they're getting more than that. Somehow, I think that these people are able to pick up the vibrational patterns. They're able to pick up those thought forms, and while they use a mythology to get there, I think deep down, if they really took a look at what they did, they'd understand that there's a step more in what they're doing. That they don't. Kreskin, I love him. He doesn't get paid unless he can find the paycheck. So
that's the one you and David was talking about the last time y'all were on my show, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
I thought I remembered him. Y'all pulled some kind of gag on him one time, I think you told me.
Well, we hid his paycheck. And there were only 3 people in the room when the paycheck got hidden. Nobody else knew where it was. And the one person who did know where the check was that wasn't David or myself was out of the room when he was searching for it. And he still found it, and it was mind-blowing. Some of the things that Darren Brown, he's an English mentalist, some of the things he does and he can get people to do. It would hard to be believed that it's just because of the way he speaks that he is able to get these people to do some of the things that he does. One of his shows, he does a complete recreation of the whole Sirhan conspiracy. He hypnotizes a gentleman to basically gun down a speaker, and they have it all set up. And this guy, when he gets the trigger, he stands up, he unloads the gun. They immediately whisk him off into a room, and they go, "Do you know what you just did?" And he went, "I just went and saw a lecture, and after the lecture, I went to the shooting range." And they're like, No, you just gunned this guy down. And he's like, "No, I went to the shooting range." And they showed him on video. And when he's watching the video there, he's watching himself pull the gun out, stand up, and shoot it, and he's still going, no, I watched the lecture, and I went to the gun range. So, it's all very interesting what the mind is capable of, and how some people can shut stuff off, and yet it's amazing.
It kind of reminds me of the Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, absolutely. That was, I believe. Now, did that come before the Sirhan Robert Kennedy thing, or after? I can't remember.
I think it was after, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
But that was the whole, that whole concept of doing that. And there have been several groups now that, for decades and decades you've heard, oh, well, you can't be hypnotized to do something you wouldn't normally do. Well, they've started to prove that maybe that's not necessarily the truth. So science, science is as wonderful as spirituality, because you said it earlier, Royce, and it's the most consistent thing that we have in our lives that we really need to lock into, because it's the one thing that is always consistent, and that's change.
Yeah. Everything changes with time. Everything.
Yes, it does.
And you either get left behind or you ride the donkey with the rest of the crowd.
Or we surf that quantum wave.
Now, that's a little bit more fun than riding a donkey, and a little bit quicker, too.
Absolutely. But the biggest problem in that is, do you catch the surf at the right time, or do you just get left after the swell goes by you? So.
Well, a lot of people, though, they get caught in these swells, and they don't seem to have the ability to see that they're caught.
Very true.
And that's what you were talking about earlier. And that goes back to the mind being a funny thing. They can actually believe there's no change, no matter how much change is around them.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting is when you start working with any kind of energy, the minute you start meditating, the minute you do Tai Chi, the minute you start doing yoga, and you start actually acknowledging the fact that you're part of the whole electrical system, it's amazing how things can change. That's one of the things that actually ends up happening with the mind and the physical body. The nasty things that happen to you, all the negativity, can actually get locked into your muscles. And it's funny, somebody who's been in this kind of situation their whole life, where they've always repressed their feelings, where they've always kept, you bite the bullet, be a good little soldier. That's the one I'm very familiar with. And they do that, and all those emotions, which again is just another form of energy, another vibration, but that all gets locked into your system, and that forms, a hardness, a contraction, almost a calcination of that energy into your system. And that's why you see a lot of people, as they get older, they get tighter and get, their limbs and everything get shrunk up and just start to gnarl, because they've taken all of this energy, this negativity, and they just hold it in. But you notice people that do the yoga, that do the meditation, they're the ones that work through their bodies and really work it out. It's interesting. I've done Tai Chi for many, many years, and at first, when I first started doing it with my teacher, Bill, every now and then somebody doing it would just start to cry, and at first everyone would get, oh my, are you okay? What's going on? And then what we realized over the years, was that what it was is people were working, they were relaxing, they were using their energy to break down these contractions. But when these contractions would break down, that energy would still have to come out. And it got to the point where if Bill was teaching a class and somebody started doing the whole crying thing, he would have one of the senior students go out and continue with the class, and he would walk the person off, and everybody else got to the point where it was like, oh, hey, good for them. They're clearing some of that crap that they got in their system. So, I think what happens with people is they let it all get to them. They let it all infest their bodies. and not realizing that you got to get it out somehow. Otherwise, it just starts to break everything down. And we know this, being good Southern men, you don't cry. You might get angry now and then, but you keep those emotions to yourself. And it's something that's endemic. And that's the other thing about the breathing, going back with the circle. The breathing really helps break down, and that oxygen that you're pulling into your system helps break down those blockages and allow you to really be more in touch with the energies in the world around you.
Does it also help your O2 levels?
It helps you on really multiple levels. It's amazing how just that, and I am a firm and total believer in Tai Chi. It's amazing what it can do for you, and the diseases and things that it helps. Again, because you're getting the energy to flow in your system. One of the very first things you learn when you do Tai Chi is you learn that breathing, because it's intrinsic to the motion. And then the whole machine starts working as a total unit, and everything starts firing, and all the vibrations are right, and it really cleans you out. It gets you relaxed. It takes care of a lot of the physical things. And again, here we have one where the Chinese have known about Tai Chi, acupuncture, and those type of things for millennia, and yet only now are we going, oh, hey, this might actually work. So,
well, how do you manage to get to breathe from your diaphragm instead of your lungs? Is there something you do different yourself?
Well, it's a conscious thing. It's actually it's using your intent to breathe low, and a lot of it is how your diaphragm actually relaxes. You're not really breathing to your diaphragm. You're breathing into the lungs, but it's how your diaphragm relaxes. And when you start, the truth is when you start working with the chi follows your mind. And there's a spot that's 3 finger widths below your belly button called the dantian in Eastern medicine. And that's where you store your personal energy in your body. And when you are breathing correctly and your mind is taking the energy around you and putting it into that area, that also gets you to do that deep abdominal breathing, because your mind is low, you're breathing low. So it tends to take it there. And it's funny. I was doing a class one time, and the instructor was going, well, Western people don't breathe like this. This is how you should be breathing. And I started thinking about it and realized how incredibly lucky and blessed I am. That's how I've always taken a breath.
Any particular reason? Were you taught that way as a child, or did it just seem to come natural?
Well, the funny thing is when you're born, that's how you breathe. When you breathe in the womb, that's how you breathe. That's how your respiration acts while you're still with your mom. And then as you're born, that's how the young children breathe. And it's only through, again, as they grow older, that it starts to flip. For me personally, my father was kind enough to put me into martial arts back before anyone even really knew in this country that there was such a thing as karate. So I'd been taught since I was 6 years old to breathe this way, that this is the way you should breathe. So for me, it's always been a constant. And it's interesting talking to people who did not have that upbringing, yet were able to really, really immerse themselves in whatever field of study that they had chosen, and to learn the breathing and to just their reactions and their epiphany about it. It's like, oh my God, I should have been breathing like this for years. And the one thing that they tend to find, and I find it too, is that if I get really, really upset, my breathing will actually flip. I'll start breathing up into my chest. But the minute I relax, I think about it, and I go back low again, then whatever it is that's getting me all upset will ease just a little bit. That tension will back off just a little bit. I mean, that's a lot of times when we have those tensions and we have those interactions with people, the person who's getting upset, The person that's getting anxious is us. A lot of times we could be having these conversations with people and they're going, what the hell? And it's because of, again, we go back to the subjective grooviness. Our interpretation of what we're hearing, our interpretation of what we're feeling might be 180 degrees from what somebody else is. I know you've had this before, just as I have, where, you say something to somebody and then a week later it comes back that you are just a real a-hole, what's up with you? And you're like, what? I didn't say anything. But everybody's unique interpretation of what goes on around them can do wondrous things to relationships.
Walk out the door to the store and say, can you kids empty the garbage while I'm gone? And then when you come back, you still mad, Dad?
Oh, exactly. It's and that's the thing is I think too many people, especially, and again, fundamentalism is endemic, and there are fundamentalist scientists as much as they're fundamentalist spiritual people. And they get so locked in, they get so tight, they get so, I don't want to say enamored because that wouldn't necessarily be the right term, but they are so sure of their righteousness in whatever it is. And the thing is you can see that same fundamentalism in a French cooking. To where they see somebody who's out there doing something that's just a little off and they get all upset because the creme fraiche is not done exactly how they've done it in Paris for the last 3,000 years. So they get all, and life is really amusing if you sit back with that attitude.
And if you're not open to change, you're not open to new, you're not open to improve.
But if you're open to the change...
It's just stagnation.
Well, it is. And the thing about it is especially for people, the more that you're locked into that, the more when the change comes, the more devastating it is.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people that were fundamentalists that are so bent on one interpretation of the Bible's infallibility, and et cetera, et cetera. And then when it finally did dawn that this was not exactly as accurate as they thought it was, they went the total opposite, off the deep end, and all of a sudden God doesn't exist. We're now an atheist.
But the funny thing, I think everybody needs to walk their own personal path. And everybody's path is different. I will be very honest with you, for a long time in my life, I had a very disdaining view of organized religion. I've now actually reached a point in my life, and I've had several friends that, quite frankly, had they not discovered Jesus, they'd be dead, flat out. I see it. I see the way their life was heading. I see the patterns of their life, and I see just a train wreck coming. Yet they found that energy, they found that vibration that resonated with them, that allowed them to take the lessons they had learned in life so far and spin it in a very positive manner. And I used to do these shows in Florida. They were called Rock Church. I was impressed. I mean, you had these heavy metal bands up there, and there were full families at these shows. They were Christian bands, but they were Christian heavy metal bands. And it was interesting how sometimes, what witnessing is, correct?
Witnessing, yeah.
Well, when in witnessing, for those who don't, it's when the person who has found Jesus as their personal Savior tells you that story, tells you how the introduction of this energy to their life has totally changed it and made it for the better. Now, some of these groups up there, when the person would do their witnessing, you could look around the room and the room would glow. I mean, it would get brighter. People they'd have their aura. You could see the aura around them, and you could see it expand and merge. And then some of these people would be up there and they would be witnessing, and it's like, you are so full of crap. You don't believe any of this, do you? And you could see it in the room. So, even in the fundamentalism, if you are walking the path that you are meant to walk, then there's a certain resonance. There's a certain thing. And there's also, I think, what happens especially in religions, and in science for that matter, is somebody through their actions, somebody through their practices, they're able to touch the face of God. They are able to feel that true energy, that source energy, whatever you want to call it. There's a source energy in the universe, and when you're able to encounter that energy on its pure primordial level, it's undescribable. It really is. You can't describe it. It's a feeling. I think the closest thing you could get would be to use the Heinlein term, grok. You can grok it. You can experience, you can know it, but trying to put words to it is just insignificant to that energy. But I think what happens is these people, they go out and they do practices, and because they're walking the right path, they touch that energy, and it's an epiphany, and it is so beautiful. It is so much love that they want everybody to have that experience. But they think that everybody has to walk in their footsteps to have that same experience, and that's where the fallacy starts to originate. Because everybody can have that experience, but they have to get it in their own way. Because they have to come about it through their own subjective grooviness and not through somebody else's. And that's where a lot of our conflicts happen, in especially when it comes to religion and philosophy, is because people go, well, this meant the world to me. Why doesn't it mean that to you? You're screwed up. There's something not wrong. Or there's something wrong with you. There's something not right in that head of yours because you don't feel the same thing I do, and I'm experiencing God right now, and you should be too. And that's where I think there is a huge disconnect.
Yeah, and that's been going on for millennia too. Catholics say that the Protestants can't be saved. Protestants say the Catholics can't be saved, and everybody's worried about who else can be saved, and not worried about themselves being saved because I'm already saved. I don't need to worry.
Well, and the reality of it is we really are. We everybody starts with that spark of spirit. Everybody has that spark of spirit in them. It's just that most of us have forgotten it, and what we have to do in life is refine it. And that's where, unfortunately, you get the conflicting subjective grooviness. It's my way is the only way. Well, no, it's not. There's way more ways to get to where you're going, and the reality of it is, in the long run, is it has nothing to do with where you're going anyway. It's all about how you're going about getting there.
Well, a lot of the misunderstanding, I think, comes out of one simple Bible passage. On this particular issue you just mentioned, I mean, not on everything, but on this one issue. And that is because I hear preachers quoted all the time. And that's where Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. Everybody takes that to mean that their religion, their church, etc. But that's not what that verse said. That verse said by him. Or, since Jesus was the Christ or the anointing, it meant, man coming to the Father but by the Holy Spirit. Could be any religion. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Well, and by him, not necessarily by the man, but by the actions that were put forward by the man. It's funny. I really believe in the teachings of Jesus. I'm not a Christian. I don't claim to be a Christian. But I believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ. I mean, that's some path there that puts you on a good road. But I've also done a lot more depth of research than a lot of people have. The Gnostic teachings are incredible. The things that the Gnostics have attributed to Jesus are absolutely amazing. And also I've gone to the depths of looking at the similarities. That's part of what arcanology is. We look at what the true deep root meanings of these are. And when you start looking at the real depths, the true esoteric teachings of Buddhism, and lay it right next to the teachings of Jesus, other than certain cultural anomalies, man,
They're
it's dead
exactly
on.
the same. I know. I've seen it. There's a book out on the market you can buy that shows it. The guy actually separated it.
Uh-huh.
He put the teachings of Jesus on one page and teachings of Buddha on the other. And on each page it has a separate teaching of each one that shows just how alike they really are.
And the thing is when you start looking at these different philosophies and beliefs, it's amazing how close they really get. There's a deeper teaching of Buddhism that a lot of people haven't heard of, and it's called Bon. And it really takes in a lot of the shamanic type practices that are out there in that area of the Far East and merge it with the Buddhism. In fact, the Bon feel that their founder was the first Buddha and not the Gautama. So it's interesting, but they have the same. All of them, they have the same, really, the true beliefs. When the things that make people what we call good or bad, when you really look at it, they're all the same. And then people put words on them, and people have the experiences, like you said, and they have this interpretation, and all of a sudden, well, it can only be my way.
Even though their way is misunderstood. I mean, and the Bible, like you were saying earlier, about 10 people could see a car wreck and understand it different. 10 people can read a Bible verse and have a different understanding of it. Same exact thing.
Well, the thing, and again, I really enjoy having the conversations with the people that come to my door. I know there's a lot of people out there that go, oh, I never have. I immediately chase the people away from my. I don't. I want to talk to them. I want to hear what they have to say. Of course, my first question always is well, so what version of the Bible are you speaking from? And that throws a lot of people. And then my other favorite question is, so what other religions have you studied? And it's amazing. What you get when you ask that question is, well, I studied Catholicism, I studied Christianity, I studied Judaism, and every now and then you might have somebody who's even looked at Islam. So what you have is you have people that have only looked at the Judeo-Christian belief system and not given any credence to anything else in the world. But there's so many it's like shamanism is an interesting one that's coming up a lot lately, where there's a lot of discussion about the term medicine man and shaman. And what I usually tell people, if they push it, if they push past, what I try to tell people, Royce, is when they ask me what I believe, I'll tend to, having talked to them, figure out where they're coming from, and I'll try to use whatever I think they will have the better understanding of. If I'm pushed really hard, I'll actually tell people I'm a Taoist, which is Taoism from China. Now, the interesting thing is when you look at the teachings and the studies of Taoism, you'll actually find that it's shamanism. The same belief structure, a lot of the same exercises and things that you need to do to reach certain states in your life. It's the same. The only difference and the reason why Taoism is considered a religion is because the Chinese have written it down for 3,000 years. It's still all the same thing. It teaches you the same way to interact with nature, and the goal is actually the same. So, just people in their words, it's amazing what they put on it. I know this one really kind of stirs a lot of animosity, but there are some amazing teachings in Islam. The Sufi teachings, the esoteric teachings of Islam are amazing. And it's funny how they coincide, I don't know, with Christianity, which Islam came from, and Judaism, which they both came from. So it's, there's a perfect example, my friend. You got 3 different religions. They all claim the same God, and they're killing each other because of how you go into temple. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, though, if you think about it, you got a exoteric teaching, which is what most of your outer circle gets per se. The people that, the way I would put it, go by the letter of the law. They read it at face value. There's no analogy or whatever to the scripture. And then you got the esoteric, which the biggest majority of the book has spiritual meaning, and you don't go so much by the letter of the law. Now, usually, from my finding, the people that go the esoteric route get a little closer, I think, to where they need to be than the exoteric. But I think there needs to sometimes be a blend of each. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's very interesting, because regardless of anything else, we still have to work within the bounds of our dichotomous reality. We still have to work within the bounds of what we have been given. And one day we'll figure out why we were given these bounds, but that's after we've removed this mortal coil, as it were.
And therein, I think, lies the secret. I mean, I'm kind of like you. I kind of had a resentment going with churches. I'm still not real fond of them. I like to say that I'm a believer in God, but I don't think God has anything to do with religion.
Right.
That's the way I put it. But I think what you're talking about, even if a religion is, like, say, the Catholic Church was back in the Dark Ages during the Crusades, even if it was something like that, maybe there are some people who would still derive goodness from it, maybe because, like you were just saying, that's the point in their life they're at, that they have to deal with what they got. And, it's just the same thing as a parent can learn from a child like it can from a grown-up.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest things right there. I watched a very interesting interview with a scholar from Bahrain, and what he said is that the biggest problem that is happening right now in the Middle East is the lack of education of these young men.
Funny you should say that.
They have one book. They have one book they read, and that is the only book. And they don't even have enough of a background to interpret that. So they are being told that this is the interpretation. As this gentleman said, it was funny. He said, what do you see when you go to a cafe in Paris or in Germany or anywhere in Europe? You walk down the street and you walk by a cafe, and there are people there reading. There are people there with newspapers. There are people there with magazines. There are people there with books. When you go through the Middle East, you don't see that. It's not as apparent, and it's not looked upon as a positive thing. And that's where and I think that we're getting a lot of that to happen in this country, and that's very scary. We won't talk about Texas.
Please, now I'm in Texas now. Come on, I gotta have some analogy.
But I see that happening in a lot of places. There was that a wonderful quote by Kanye West about how people using big words. He got no time for anybody reading, and he's never asked for a book's autograph. Well, that's a problem. How can you really make a discerning decision about your life without any kind of background? I have, like I've said before, I have an incredible Tai Chi teacher, Bill Smith. He's a wonderful teacher, but he has got me to where I've been introduced to some other incredible esoteric teachers. And one of the things I like about some of the Buddhist teachers is they don't want you to have blind faith. In fact, they speak against it. Some of the Bon teachers are amazing. They say, test the teachings. If I tell you to do this act, try it. See what happens. If you have a positive reaction, if you have a positive experience, well, then do it again. And see if that positive reaction, that positive experience keeps building. But just because I'm the teacher here, I'm the Rinpoche, don't take my word for it. This is what works for me. It may not work for you. So test the teachings. Find out what works for you, and then do that so that we're all going for the same goal. It's just we got to figure out which way we got to get there.
It's interesting you should say that, too, because it's fundamentalists, as far as I know, that like to cling to this, blind faith issue so strong. And I can guarantee you, I've read the Bible over 7 times. Nowhere does God in that word ask for blind faith. In fact, it was the Apostle James in the Bible who said to test and try every spirit. Well, you can't have blind faith and test every spirit, too. But having said that, I finally asked somebody in one of the groups I was in that was hollering about blind faith, where does he get that in the Bible? And he pasted a scripture from Matthew where when Jesus come and, told Peter to follow him, and straight away Peter got up and followed him. That was his example of blind faith. In other words, he didn't question Jesus. He just got up and went after him like he was told. And I'm like, this is your idea of a teaching for blind faith?
Yeah, it's... I don't understand the blind faith part. I really don't. And a lot of it is because, I have to see something and experience it to believe in it truly. Now, can I believe that something could exist? Oh, absolutely. I have an imagination. I can believe all kinds of amazing things. But to truly, truly endorse it, I have to experience it. And again, that's why I brought up the rock church stuff. I've seen the energy. I've seen the glow of the spirit of Jesus, and that that'll wake you up pretty quick. There is a validity there. There is an energy there. There is a power there. To totally discount anything in this world is also, I think, a level of ignorance too. It's like aliens. NASA shows us the pictures of the heavens. There are how many stars out there? And for humans to be so arrogant as to think we're the only ones, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
I recently saw a post on Facebook, and it had an article there. They had found evidence that the NSA, I think it was, or the FBI, had covered up evidence of extraterrestrial, and it had surfaced in the Freedom of Information window.
Well, I mean, you saw the recent release. The military has released Project Blue Book.
I thought they released that years ago.
No, they didn't release all of it.
So they finally released the whole thing. Oh.
But they released it's something insane, like 10,000 pages. And they released the whole thing in one. Here's your 10,000 pages. So, it'd be interesting to see what's in that. It's like my favorite example, Royce, is the crop circles. Okay, so you take all of the crop circles that are out there, and I am way inflating this number. You say that 95% of them, and you can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that 95% of them have been man-made. You still have the other 5%.
That is true. And that's been one of the points I've seen brought up in many an article on the internet, too, by the way.
Mm-hmm. There's when you get it's. I have had an encounter with the Bigfoot. Now, when you look at that and you look at the history of the Sasquatch, again, this believe it or not, this is all part of arcanology, is to looking at these things and looking at these connections. But when you look at the Sasquatch in this country, they have been cited in every state in the Union with the exception of one state. and that would be Hawaii. The island out there in the middle of the big ocean. Somehow they haven't gotten there yet. But they've been spotted in every other, and then you start looking at the history. My favorite historical story about the Sasquatch is from the Choctaws. And they had an ongoing trade relationship with the Sasquatch. Except that every time they did a trade, the Choctaws ended up on the downside of the trade. Until they started thinking that these beings coming out of the woods, these hairy men, were cheating them and just stopped trading with them. But, so how can you really look at that and go, oh, there's no such thing? Well, yeah, but there's got to be something going on out there. And then we get to the science, and my favorite, because I've seen this happen on several shows and in several articles, where they get the hairs, they run the DNA, and it matches absolutely nothing. So their conclusion is, it's nothing.
Yeah, it don't exist.
Well, wait a second. You got hair. You got an object. It's in your hand. But because you can't match it to anything, it doesn't exist. It doesn't take away the fact you still got the damn hair in your hand.
Kind of makes you wonder, though, what could the hair belong to, doesn't it?
Well, exactly. And if you know that it's coming from a place that has a lot of these encounters, it gets funny because when you start with a scientific theory, you start with these suppositions. You don't necessarily know that they're true or not. You think they are, and then you set everything up to prove again and again that what you're saying is true. Because to science, it has to be again and again and again, replicable data has to occur. But to go, well, this is an anomaly, but it's happening all the time. So you're getting replicable data, but since it won't fit into the mold, you're going to discount it. It just, it's... we get back again to the subjective grooviness.
Well, I can't figure out what it is, so it must not exist, or I'd be able to figure it out.
Uh-huh. And I much prefer going through life trying to figure everything out, knowing that I'm not going to get any of it really right until, I'm 6 feet under. Or, in my case, until I'm 1,500 feet in the air blowing up in a piece of fireworks. So...
Yet you got a higher curiosity level than the other ones do.
Well, but that's not necessarily a good thing either. So, because as they said, curiosity killed the cat.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the cat wanted to know. But, by the way, speaking of getting killed, my show's fixing to get killed in the next, so I'd say 3 or 4 minutes. You got anything you want to throw out there real quick that we haven't had a chance to mention?
Just, if you get a chance, go out there, and I think you'll find a lot of the things that we are actually discussing are in Demon Street, USA. It really, the book has a lot of spiritual in it that most people, they're looking at the paranormal. And David and I really try to build a multi-layered reality. So a lot of the things that we've discussed today are actually brought to your attention in that. So go out and get a copy of Demon Street USA, and Arcanology 101 at WordPress.com is my site where a lot of these things I've explained and gotten into some very interesting discussions. Speaking of which, I never saw that link in the chat room. Oh, I put it up there. I can redo that for you, and I'll put it on your... I'll go ahead and put it on your Facebook site, too. Thanks, I appreciate it. I'm going to go check it out. And I just heard the music, so that just summoned us to the end of this. Robbie, I've really enjoyed this here. It's been a pleasure. I got an open door for you anytime you want to come on. Royce, I am so glad that you're back on the air, and I hope you feel better. Look into some of that breathing stuff. I'll send you some links. Okay, we'll do it. Thanks, Robbie.